Hello everyone, and welcome back to Trading Secrets. Today's topic was suggested by an Italian friend. He found the recent media coverage of the medical situation in India to have racist undertones. He thought it would make for an interesting video to look into what Indian medical system looked like throughout Indian history, and if at some point Western medicine borrowed from the Indian one. So grazie Riccardo for reaching out. By the way, if anyone else wants to suggest similar topics for a future video, do get in touch. So after a lot of thinking and frustrated news reading, I decided to look into Indian medicine with as clerical an approach as I could. So here is a simple video essay discussing medical science in the Indian subcontinent. To be clear, this is not a video to show off the medical advancements that may have occurred in India or to convince a global audience of the efficacy of Ayurveda. I am not a doctor, but simply a researcher and presenter. And since I'm obviously not a doctor, I'm assuming I must give a please do not try this at home without consulting your proper doctor warning. So let's start at the very beginning. But not such a beginning where globally illnesses were linked to demonic energy and the only cure was charms and prayers. But the beginning of what we may recognize as medical science, which takes us back to 6th millennium BCE, to Mehergarh, a Harappan site in modern-day Pakistan. Dental remains of 9 adults have shown that they used to treat dental cavities by drilling into the teeth with sharpened flint tools. Significant smoothing of the walls of the cavity shows that these individuals just carried on chewing and living their life after having had the treatment. These individuals were found in graves ranging over a 1500-year span. However, this practice died out after 4500 BCE because none of the Chalcolithic layers produced similar results, despite the fact that they continued to have poor dental health. Jumping forward to the 8th century BCE, we see the prevalence of the ancient Indian medicine called Ayurveda, meaning the knowledge of life. For a lot of people, Ayurveda may be a combination of spiritual and physical healing. I will focus on the physical part of it. Ayurveda, while dealing with the usage of locally grown herbs and plants to treat illnesses, is largely a lifestyle-based practice. It advises more on what one must use to boost one's energy. So it tells you to drink kadhas or concoctions which are made from plant-based ingredients such as turmeric and ajwain. Charaka, a royal physician in the court of Kanishka, followed this therapeutic path in his book called Charaka Samhita. But India also had physicians to actually operate on the patients. Sushruta is known as the father of Indian surgery. His book, Sushruta Samhita, talks about Sushruta's deep understanding of each layer of the human body. Because Hindu law doesn't allow for autopsies, Sushruta managed to inspect the body by either slowly scraping off the layers of the skin or dunking the body in water, waiting for it to naturally disintegrate. With this knowledge, he went on to perform plastic surgery by first sedating the patient with wine and cannabis and then using living flesh to graft over the injured part of the body. He also gets credited for practicing an earlier form of cataract surgery called couching, which involved using a sharp curved tool to carefully push down the lens. The success rate was nowhere near to modern-day cataract surgery, and still more than 50% of the patients continued to live their life with some sense of sight, as opposed to total blindness, which is quite impressive. And it also goes to show how well he knew the inner workings of the complex human eye. Sushruta was also the first person to recognize that malaria was caused by mosquitoes, and therefore emphasized the importance of personal and societal hygiene. His mastery in surgery extended to cesarean sections, amputations, you name it. But he also practiced bloodletting, cupping, and leeching. So we have to take everything with a grain of salt. He was known in the Greek world as Sukruta, and his moral code is very similar to the Hippocratic oath of the Greek physician Hippocrates. This concept of doing no intentional harm is an oath that all doctors must take before entering the profession. So where were the physicians learning and practicing their skills? Hospitals have existed in India since 6th century BCE, since the time of Gautam Buddha. They were always meant to be a state-run endeavor, and mostly free of cost to the general public, at least according to the rock edicts of King Ashoka. The doctors who worked at these hospitals could belong to any caste, according to Charaka and Sushruta, and they were trained in medical schools at Takshashila and Varanasi. Hospitals could be set up as extensions of temples or set up individually. Buddhist monasteries often had sick rooms for treating people with various illnesses. Muslim rulers after the 10th century CE followed suit, with hospitals being set up all over North India by the Mughal king Akbar and in southern India by Qutub Shah of Golconda. These hospitals had Persian and Indian physicians working there, studying both Indian and Persian medicine. Sati-un-Nisa was a well-known Iranian lady physician in the Gurkhani court of India who so impressed Shah Jahan that she was put in charge of serving Mumtaz Mahal of the Taj Mahal fame. Later, she was even buried in the complex of the Taj Mahal. But most of these hospitals were used to treat physical ailments. In the Chola Empire, during the reign of Veera Rajendra Deva, a hospital was built for the mentally ill members of the society. They saw them as people who needed medical treatment, rather than as a lost cause. When we talk about the concept of ancient Indian medicine, we know of the great men such as Charaka and Sushruta, because mostly they were royal physicians. But when we look at medicine at ground level, the burden largely falls on the nameless members of the society who were bound to their households or their smaller communities. I'm talking about the women who took care of their families when they fell sick. They were expected to know which herbs to use to treat their ailing husbands and children and how to bring down their fever. It was only when the women's cures failed did they go see a doctor. And let us not forget the midwives who performed numerous deliveries, nursed the children, and helped the women regain their strength. Each village in India had their own midwives, also known as dais, who were skilled birth attendants. It tended to be a caste-based profession, and the knowledge was passed down from mother to daughter. But as the missionary and British nurses came in, these women got sidelined, and now they're finally trying to reclaim their profession with increased scientific knowledge. Everything that I've mentioned thus far was practiced by the predominantly Hindu society in India. But the tribal communities of the Indian subcontinent had also developed their own medical knowledge using the local flora and fauna. For example, tribes in Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Odisha make this red ant chutney, which supposedly reduces flu-y symptoms. But what about what my friend was saying? Was there at any point an assimilation of Western and Indian medicine? Well, it depends on what we consider as Western in this context. For now, let's just call it foreign. Because the Indian Buddhist world was such an integral part of the trade connections of the Silk Roads, it gave the Buddhist travelers a perfect window to introduce the Indian medicinal knowledge to the Chinese Han Dynasty in the early centuries of the Common Era. Indian ophthalmology got integrated into Chinese medical practices. Later on, as the dominance of the Muslim rulers grew over the trade routes, they gained access to this rapidly advancing knowledge spreading across the Silk Roads. They brought the practice of variolation, a precursor to vaccination, to the Indian subcontinent. Although there are accounts of some Indian Buddhist travelers teaching a very similar practice called Tika to the eastern parts of the Silk Roads. When the Islamic Empire set up their hospitals in India, they primarily practiced the Unani tradition of medicine, which was a mix of Greek, Arabic, and Persian traditions. Just like Ayurveda, it relied heavily on herbs and minerals. Emperor Akbar of the Mughal Empire encouraged the amalgamation of Ayurveda and Unani practices to make use of more local products and combat local diseases. It also helped the local Hindu population be less hesitant to seek medical help. This triggered large-scale translations of the Indian medical knowledge into Persian and later Urdu, making it way more accessible for the Western world. This process carried on until the colonial period. Early Christian physicians, such as the Portuguese family Da Silva, also started writing about Indian pharmacology. The Portuguese, followed by the British, first set up hospitals as army hospitals, run by Christian missionaries, and later started training Indian doctors in Western medicine, gradually sidelining the Indian traditions. Until the arrival of the British, unless you were a royal physician, you were paid very little, And traditionally, you would have to treat every single person of the society, which for an upper caste Hindu, i.e. Brahmin, meant treating the people who they would otherwise consider unworthy of their touch. And so the profession was largely taken up by people belonging to the middle and lower castes. The advent of Western medicine elevated the status of a doctor in the colonial regime. Brahmins were increasingly drawn to it, thus changing the entire demography of the profession. Brahmins are now found complaining about people from other castes getting an opportunity to learn this profession alongside with them. Today, Indian doctors and nurses are found working all over the world in large numbers. In India, on the other hand, their pay and treatment by the public health sector is so poor that only 10% of all registered medical practitioners work with government health services. To once again go back to my friend's original question, in India, a large majority of people still rely on home remedies for daily cures. And only when things get really bad do they actually seek help from Western medicine. Home remedies mostly comprise of the concoctions of milk and turmeric and ginger and ajwain. And these concoctions don't necessarily not work, but there aren't any large-scale scientific tests being done to find out why they work. Especially in this day and age, when we are so worried about clinically tested products, rightfully so, Ayurveda needs to get right into the chemistry of it all and find out why it works. And when home remedies don't work out, they go see an allopathic doctor. So I suppose an exchange of Indian and Western medicine did occur, but perhaps only in the Indian subcontinent. If you enjoyed this video, do let me know in the comments below. And as usual, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye!